Business process mapping. I know those three words are incredibly intimidating to a lot of people, but they don't have to be. It's procedures and creating a simple outline and setting apart things for your business that can really make a difference in the foundational structure of how your business runs and then how it profits, because everybody knows what's expected and everybody knows what's coming. We demystify it in this particular episode of the Revenue Intelligence. Enjoy. Now, there are three areas where procedures are not only relevant, but absolutely necessary. And most of you watching this are going to look and say, I don't have procedures in those areas. And you're probably right. Most of us don't. But if you're going to start, if you're ever going to document why that is, then these are the three places to start, and the three areas, common areas that you come up with as to why to have a procedure. So these are just a list of action steps on how to do different tasks. And we'll talk about why you need those in just a minute. But the very first one is sales. And the second one is operations. And the third is administration. So you say, well, I see marketing procedures sometimes. Where's that? Well, why don't we add that to the list? If you want to get more in detail, yes, you can add other categories. You should add other categories when you get big enough. But for right now, let's put marketing under sales. Let's put shipping procedures, which is an important thing to fulfill, fulfillment in general. Put those under operations, and say human resources. That's big on and employee management, employee benefits, and that sort of thing. If you're a really small business, you don't have to deal with this. But if you're 5 or more, you need to start to consider it all the way up to more than that. 5 is usually the starting number for professional employment organizations to even have the numbers that work to mess with it. So we skated that line for a long time, but there were times when we had multiple PEOs working in multiple states, and I had to balance them. I was the one who got to balance all that. So that was truly thrilling, trying to make sure everybody was on the same pages as to what they do. So most of anything you can come up with a procedure for falls into one of these three categories. And when you're just starting out with this, it is so easy to get overwhelmed and discouraged and say, I'm not going to do this. Why am I wasting my time? Why am I doing this for my company? And so just start simple. Start with this and start with these three areas, and this will cover most of what you need. Then if you feel the need later to branch out and to have subcategories that then become categories of their own, then fine. Maybe you're an HR company and that's what you deal with. Maybe you're a shipping company and that's what you deal with. Maybe you're a digital marketer like a lot of you. And so most of your stuff is marketing, procedures, how to do different things. Maybe you know them, but maybe you need to train a virtual assistant. Maybe you need to train, any number of people as to how to do what you do. So that is where procedures come in. That is where procedures are huge. Is dealing with all of that and making sure that they're good and they're well written and they're easy to follow. So we have some tips along those lines that may help you in your procedure writing. We're not going to get a whole lot into the weeds with this, but I hope these really help you. And a lot of them based off of, there's a book called The E-Myth Revisited by Michael Gerber. If you've never read it, go read it. It's like required reading around me. It's fantastic. And I've been exposed to it for about 20 years or so. And it has been at the core of not only businesses that I've been involved with, but others as well. And some you may not even think. One of the people we introduced it to owned a tattoo shop. And he took and implemented that book into the tattoo shop and what they were doing. And so unlike a lot of places, it was run almost like a hospital. To that level of surgical procedure. Everybody knew what was expected. Everybody, fell in. It wasn't he had dynamic artists who were very good and ran the place and did well, but it wasn't run, it wasn't overrun by them, taking over the business side. It was, he ran the business side, freed them up to do what they were good at. And he got to do what he was good at. So, which was keeping everything, in balance. So this is the E-Myth is where this comes from. Great read, easy read, and really walks through how to optimize a business, how to do it from the ground up when it's already, mostly the examples of when it's already going. And he uses stories and anecdotes and different things to do that. So a lot of this comes from there, but not solely. So these are just some things to think about. Okay. So the first one is be thorough yet concise. So there's this temptation when you're coming up with procedures, or at least you think in your head, this should be this giant book of whatever. So, or it's the opposite way. For those of you who have ever bought something and tried to assemble it with the some assembly required thing that ends up being a lot of assembly required. Those of you who are parents know exactly what I'm talking about. You have had one of those, one of those holidays, one of those Christmases, when you're there trying to assemble something and the directions are awful. So you know what I'm talking about. So be thorough. Don't leave anything out, but yet don't make it a huge book, literally either. Be straight and to the point, and don't miss steps. We'll talk about some more of that in just a minute. But this is at least just a simple, surprisingly simple, yet great place to start with doing this, right? Okay, the second one is let's see, design this so that they can be completed. Okay, these two are important, and these next two are important. So this is the E-Myth thing, right? So design this so that it can be completed by the person with the lowest skill set required, the minimum skill set required to do the job. Okay. So what do I mean by that? With the least, I'm just trying to make sure I get this right. With the least amount of skill required to do the job. So what does that mean? That basically means, people don't treat people like they're stupid, but the idea here is the absolute minimum skill that it takes to do this. And we'll talk about extra training and certification in just a second. But you want to write a procedure such that a person who doesn't have to have that much skill can make this happen. Now, why is that important? Why would you do that? Well, the main reason is substitution, is cross-training, is somebody being able to do your job if you're out for a day sick, or you're on vacation, or you're whatever. My wife is fixing to go on vacation. She's about to go on vacation. Yes, I said fixing to. She's about to go on vacation. And so there are certain tasks that she does that no one else is available to do. It doesn't mean other people can't do them, but no one else is available to do them on a regular basis. So she is training somebody specific, or showing somebody specifically, not training her because it's really not that, some of it's not that hard, but just showing her what she does and how, and getting her all set up so that this lady can fill in while my wife is out on vacation. And so it's just a perfect example like that. This lady's, incredibly smart, has a PhD, and what we're talking about here is low level accounting stuff. Most of us could probably do it if we thought about it, but it's just the role that's there. And it's not something this other lady is familiar with. It's not her general area of expertise, but she's certainly has the minimum skill set to figure it out with a little bit of guidance. So that's the deal. So it is, it's important that happen. And so it's somebody with the minimum amount of skills required to do this. So you're making these procedures as simple as possible for somebody who does not normally do this. They're highly intelligent, but they don't normally do this stuff. Okay. So the next thing is, if it requires a little bit of training, so make sure the minimum certification or training required whenever you're coming up with this. And that too is, plays to the same. There are some things that you just have to be certified to do. There's no other way around it. Okay. So, but make it the minimum certification, again, for replaceability if something happens. If that person gets mad and leaves the company, If that and they start trying to do damage, well, then you're really not without them, because you've taken the time to show others how to do what they do. So while it's an inconvenience, it's not catastrophic. That's the idea. Okay, so you're not. So that's the beauty of what procedures provide. Good, well written, decently put together procedures can provide. Somebody can step in and do that job for an interim time, whether that person's on vacation or out sick or gone permanently, never to return, and taken half the group with them. It runs all three of the gambits there. So these are the reasons why you want somebody that's the minimum skill set or minimum certification required to do what they're going to do. Okay, so this is a short one, but it makes a lot of sense. And it kind of goes back to point one. Document even the obvious. Don't leave any step out, okay? Because you never know how even intelligent people process things. There are some people in this world, highly, highly intelligent folks, that whenever they are looking at a procedure, and they need every little step put out there, even though it's so obvious, it frustrates you to watch it. Okay. They need that. They need that continuation. It's not that they're stupid. It is that that's just the way their brain is wired. And they need those step by step by painful step, at least to you anyway. Or if you're one of those people, you really do want that step. And when it's left out, you just can't deal with it very well. So even whenever you're documenting things, when you're coming up with procedures for stuff, for how to do certain things, don't leave any step out, even the obvious. Make sure they're all there. Make sure they're all in place. And again, even the painfully obvious, it's much better. Those of you who've had to, or those of you even from a common sense standpoint, even if you're not wired that way, that you have to have every little detail. Again, I go back to putting together the toy or whatever that you've had to do for your kid. There is inevitably a step, or furniture. There is inevitably a step that is missing somewhere that should be there. And yeah, it somewhat should be obvious, but it's really not. And you could go either way with something. And there is absolutely no clarification on how to do that. Okay. You know what I'm talking about. So don't leave any step out when you're coming up with this. It's worth the little bit of extra pain it's going to cause you to do that base level of documentation. Okay. It really is. And the final point with putting together procedures is make sure at least 3 people know how to do the procedure. Anyone you come up with. And yeah, one of those could be a supervisor. One of those could be somebody that's a similar level that works through it. One of those could be somebody that's completely from a different place, but has a little, enough time on their hands to deal with it. So make sure 2 is okay if you have to. 3 is better. Make sure 3 people know how to do everything in every different task in your particular business. Or can be shown very quickly how to do so, because it will just make a world of difference. Then you're not held hostage by anything, not by weather, not by illness, not by, bad blood leaving a company, firing, relocation, salesperson getting mad and just leaving, and others, that are in positions of high power in a particular business getting mad and just leaving. You're not held hostage by that, because you have taken the time, and it was painful and it took you forever to do it. But you've taken the time to make this happen. You have taken the time to really put these details in place and to not leave anything out. So you are rewarded with anybody being able to step in at almost a moment's notice and do what needs to be done, at least for a certain amount of time, until that person either comes back or you get a replacement, depending on what the situation is. So procedures, extremely, extremely valuable. And we'll show you in a little bit their place in our world as to how we talk to different businesses about using them. Tedious as they are, they have a major place in the foundation of what we do. So how do we get started with this? So Let me introduce you to a tool that was my first assignment when I started at that maintenance and reliability consulting company. Even though I was there for the IT, I was there for the computer world, but I still needed to understand dealing with all of these engineers in different types, different places, different aspects of the business as to why they were in a given situation. I needed to understand that. And so the first thing they made me do as a relatively young adult was to map business process. So let's talk about business process mapping. This is the tool that will help you through a lot of things if you're willing to embrace it. There are lots of books and materials and things out there about it, and we'll go into greater detail next time on how to do it and some relatively easy ways. Don't overthink this. This is everything we've just been talking about. It's just put into a more formal process. Okay, that's all it is. So you can, and you possibly will, completely overthink the situation and be intimidated by it and shut down and not do it. Well, the fact of the matter is, it's not as hard as you're about to make it out to be. So please don't do that. Don't do that to your business. Don't do that to yourself. Don't do that as a leader for those around you. Particularly if you need buy-in or you want buy-in on how to do it, just don't do that to yourself. Okay. So what is it? So this is a comprehensive way, although surprisingly simple, of mapping your entire business process from start to finish. So this goes back to what we were talking about earlier. Where are the three areas of procedures? Sales, operations, and administration. So those are some of the overall places you start. You think about, okay, let's start with the first one. What is my sales process? What is my process for getting customers into my company? This is one we focus on a lot when you're talking about business and marketing optimization, which is what JKO Works does here in my company. So what is the sales process by which things get done? And yeah, you're saying in the back of your mind, that's obvious. We've got to get clients on social media, then we do this, and then we send them some emails, and then they get to a call, and we have a little call, and we don't have a process that we go through. We just work our magic and everything happens. And all of a sudden they either say yes and we get going on board, or they say no and they suck and we never hear from them again. Or if we're a forward thinking company, we start looking for ways to, okay, this is a drip campaign here. We can try to get them back on board and see if we can convince them into doing stuff, or maybe they need to wait a little bit or whatever. However they end up there. Or if they said yes, then we're going great guns. We're getting everything set up. We're getting started. A lot more marketers than you would think tell me privately that where they struggle the most is not the sales process. It is the onboarding afterwards. It's the transition from what they say they can do and getting payment for what they say they can do to actually doing it and actually, implementing that out there. They can do both, but that transition, and oftentimes they're set up to do both, or depending on how they are, they have people standing by that are set up to do both. But in that transition is where they struggle. And it's getting somebody to that onboarding section. This is where a business process map can help a lot, because you do some of the exact things we were just talking about a second ago. You take all of this into consideration. You design it for so the least person with the least skill set or the least certification can do this, so that 2 or 3 people can cross train on it. So you don't, and it's step by step, even the obvious. You're thorough, but yet you're concise. And so you don't mire everybody in these giant volumes of books or giant PDF files or whatever. You make it relatively simple, step by step, for them to follow. And that's where a business process map makes a huge difference. Okay, so why would you use it? Well, to make this whole process easier, frankly. We normally, when we go through this, we will sit down and we will say, okay, we'll take those 3 areas. We have your sales, we have your operations, and we have your administration. What are the main areas that we need to start by documenting, so we're just not overwhelmed by this whole thing? What are the most important processes, right? So under sales, it'd be attracting clients, yes, but mostly getting paid, going through that customer journey, the initial part of that customer journey, to where they first find out about you, all the way up to the point that they make that first payment. Then it transitions. Operations takes over. Okay. And how does operations? Well, it's usually the area of fulfillment. Do they have to ship anything? Do they have to set up software? Do they have to set up clients and customize something to what they're doing? Do they have to, is there a walk in the store sales transaction? They walk out. Is there anything they have to support? Is there warranty issues there that need to be documented? And then you talk about administration. Well, what is administration? It starts with the accounting side. It starts with getting paid. How does that process work, where it goes from the customer's wallet to the bank account? One of the things that I looked at last year was in becoming a credit card processor, I hoped. And I guess the door's still open, but it's me that's the problem. But one of the things they talked about a lot in the training for that is the journey that a transaction takes, and from somebody's wallet, in the form of cash or really a credit card in this case, all the way through, including bank drafts or wires along the way. And the process of the credit card, your credit card company has a bank associated with it. And so the funds are taken out of the bank and they're sent through the wires, and they end up at the other bank that's tied to that other client, and through their bank account, or however that works, usually their bank account. And so how does that, that process was tediously brought out and tediously put out there, but it had to be, because then that's how you understand how the fees work, how all kinds of different transactions work, how the billing structure works for credit cards and processing. It's because it can get complicated, but you had to understand that journey first. And that's procedures back and forth, the entire time. So there are lots of reasons why you need to have procedures. And so a business process map documents every step of that journey, no matter how tedious. It covers everything, and it's a tool designed to cover everything. Oftentimes it takes the form of a flow chart. And so if you look up business process maps, you will see a lot of flow charts, and where it works from one step to the next. Maybe there is a decision point or not, and what happens when those decisions are made, or it can go any number of directions. But it starts out oftentimes, and we'll get into this more next time, as just an outline. If you've ever had to outline a chapter back in school for a particular book, or create an outline, a table of contents of something, that's oftentimes how this starts. And that way you can see what's out there and what your options are. So that is the best place to start, I was seeing how deep I went in there. On a piece of paper, so you have the three places. So pick your most common ones, probably sales. Okay. So sit down with a piece of paper or a Word document or whatever makes you happy, and write, number one, what's the very beginning of that journey? Customer is out there looking for something. Number two, looking for, apply it to your business. They're out there looking for a gym to join, or they're out there looking for medical treatments, or weight loss, or they need a new roof if you switch over to the home services people, or they need more customers. Customers looking for more customers. Businesses looking for more customers. Digital marketers, that one's for you. So they're out there looking for any number of things. Okay, so what are the methods they go by? They perhaps go to it's not which method do they go by, because particularly in digital marketing, but a lot of businesses, they have a lot of choices. You can go any different direction. So pick the ones that are the most appropriate to what you do. Do they walk in a store? They walk in your store. Do they get on Google and start looking, or specifically search for something? Do they ask a friend? Do they get into a group, on Facebook or some other means, and ask around in there for advice, as many of us have done? Do they go to YouTube and start looking for videos? Do they look for reviews? Do they look for comparisons? Do they look for all those sorts of things? And the answer is yes, depending on, they do all that depending on how they go. So what's the next step after that? Do they find something? Then how do they narrow down that decision? And once they narrow down that decision, and they pick a company, let's assume your business, then what happens? They reach out, they attend a webinar, or they make a phone call, or they walk in the business, or they do whatever, and they get the information, the buying information that they need, or they browse, or they do whatever. Maybe they ultimately, what happens if they decide to buy? What happens if they decide not to buy right now? What happens if they decide not to buy at all from you? Okay, so those three things. So what you're doing is, on a page, you're outlining this. Point 1, point 2, point 3, point 4. Maybe you have some point A, point B under, say, point 4. And you're documenting that journey just in a list. It's a big list. But that's the foundation of a business process map, that you have all that laid out, because each one of those number points and the letter subpoints, or however it is that you document that, each one of those are going to become places on a flowchart, represented by, they could be a decision, they could be an action step, they could be a data point, they could be any number of things, but you got to start with that basic list. So just sit down and pick your most important process, probably sales, and just list out the actual painful order of steps in the way that things happen. And you'll be amazed at what you come up with and the level that you come up with. But what you'll start to see a little bit later on, as it gets more developed, is maybe you hit a step that you realize, oh, I don't know what to do then whenever that happens. What do we do? What have we been doing? Have we been doing anything? Or do these people say no, they say not right now, and they go off into oblivion? Have a customer that they're great the first month. After that, they don't follow up with them. And you say, well, that's obvious, but not to everybody. I mean, they know they need to do it, but they just don't have, or maybe they know they need to do it, they just don't have a way to go do it that has worked very well, or they just plain don't know what to do, but they want to do something. Okay. So what you start to see are gaps in your process that you may not have known were there had you not sat down and made this giant list of the process order of things. Okay. You don't believe me? Try it. It's not that hard. Take you, if you do it 5-10 minutes. To list that entire journey out. Now, when you do that, though, resist the temptation, and we'll talk about this more next week, but next time you see this, but usually next week. But they resist the temptation to blur processes together. Okay, so if you're just make it as simple a process as you can, and then when you hit the end of that, you're done. Don't try to document the entire customer journey from start to finish all the way through. Break it down. Don't do that to yourself. Maybe break down your prospecting process alone. Then break down your sales call, if that's what you have, or your encounter, or your webinar, or your seminar, or somebody walks into the store. What happens? The Michael Gerber tells a great story about going into a hotel out in California, and it was one of these little smaller hotels, sort of a boutique hotel, and there's a whole lot more that you need to read. You need to read the story about, but the basics of it. But for the sake of the example here, he went into the restaurant, and all along the staff, extremely friendly. Was making casual conversation with him, sometimes as people do in hotels, right? So, and his room, it was kind of on the Pacific coast, so it was a little chilly, so it had a little fireplace and had a little couple chairs there, as some hotels do, and it was a little nicer than most. So little more upscale. So it had that little fireplace and place to be in bed and all that. And so, he puts his stuff down in the room, goes to dinner in the hotels, in the restaurant. So he's in the restaurant, and all the while the staff is making this very casual conversation with him that did not register with him at all. They're just little things they would ask him. What was his favorite kind of drinks he liked? What did he enjoy doing? It's just you wouldn't think anything of. All of a sudden, things started happening later. He comes back to his room, and I guess he enjoys, reading at the time. It's 2005, so following. Enjoys reading a particular newspaper, and with a glass of wine sitting by fire or something when he's generally at home. Comes back, and there's that newspaper. It's rolled up by that sitting area by the fireplace with the fire going. But while he was gone, and there's a glass of wine sitting there. It's California after all. So, and he just absolutely floored at this. And it's his favorite wine that he liked, and is just blown away by it. And there were more incidents like this that happened the entire time during this stay. And he is so blown away by it that he ends up talking to the hotel manager about it, because he'd never experienced anything like that level of customer detail. But this was because they took the time to map all of this out and how they could fulfill it. And so that's just one example. There are dozens. But it's so cool it's a cool story. So, read or listen to the book wherever you are. But that's the power of how business process mapping can work.